He built billion-dollar empires with cold precision, but one glance at the 4 tiny faces sitting beside his ex-wife, and everything he thought he wanted shattered like glass and with tears. Grayson Caldwell had money, power, and fame, but not love, not since the day he walked away from the only woman who ever knew his real heart. What he didn't know, she didn't just raise their child. She raised 4. Hello, family. Before we begin this heart-healing journey, tell me, could you forgive a man who abandoned you during your darkest hour if he returned years later remorseful and willing to become the father he once refused to be? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share with someone who believes in second chances. And in case you haven't subscribed yet, here at Love and Twilights we bring you the best love stories in the world. Now let's begin. Grayson Caldwell had never fit the mold of the Southern gentleman. While his peers sipped sweet tea on porches and talked about tailgates and gospel brunches, he buried himself in code, algorithms, and circuit boards. At just 26, he was already building prototypes in his dorm room at the University of Georgia, dreaming of tech startups and software that could change the world. But none of that prepared him for her. It was a late June evening when Grayson found himself at a cookout by the Savannah River, invited by a classmate who promised, "You need to breathe some real air before you start glowing in the dark from your laptop screen." The air was thick with the scent of hickory and summer jasmine. Music played low from a nearby porch, and fireflies dotted the night. That's when he saw her. Sophie Miller, in a pale linen dress with her hair swept up loosely, stood barefoot in the grass, laughing as she tried to teach 2 kids the steps to an old swing dance. Her laughter rang clear, and her movements were full of grace, like someone who didn't know how to carry anything but light. Grayson stared longer than he should have. "Don't just stand there like you're debugging the stars," his friend nudged. "Go talk to her." He did. Sophie smiled at him the way warm bread might welcome a hungry man, natural, generous, without pretense. "You're the one who built the drone, right?" she asked. "The one that landed in the pastor's tree last week?" Grayson winced. "That was me." She laughed again. Well, it gave the whole church something to talk about other than the sermon. He chuckled, and something inside him uncoiled for the first time in a long while. That night, under a canopy of moss-draped oaks, they talked for hours. Sophie shared stories of her childhood growing up in the historic district, daughter of a preacher and a seamstress. Grayson told her about his obsession with logic and code, and how he'd always felt out of sync with his surroundings. "I think maybe you're not out of sync," she said quietly, "just meant to create a different rhythm." No one had ever said anything like that to him. They met again the next afternoon, and again the next. They walked River Street with ice cream cones, visited the old bookshop where Sophie worked part-time, and explored abandoned warehouses where Grayson saw possibilities and Sophie saw poetry. They disagreed often, about music, politics, even whether ketchup belonged on grits, but somehow each disagreement felt like another reason to stay. When he kissed her for the first time, it was in the back garden behind her parents' house. The night was humid and quiet, and Sophie had jasmine in her hair. The kiss was slow, unsure, and electric. She leaned back, touching his face. "I knew you were hiding a little heart in there somewhere," Grayson whispered. "I think you just unlocked it." Their relationship moved quickly, not because of haste, but because neither of them saw a reason to hesitate. Sophie's parents, Thomas and Mary, welcomed him with polite caution at first, unsure what to make of the lanky tech genius who could barely operate a barbecue grill. But when Thomas caught Grayson helping Mary carry groceries, and later heard him fix the church's sound system in under an hour, his tone changed. Grayson was not traditional, but he was kind, and Sophie loved him. By spring they were planning a small wedding. The ceremony was held in the courtyard of a historic mansion, under a sky soft with morning light. Sophie wore a simple white dress her mother had sewn by hand, every stitch filled with love. Grayson wore a cream-colored linen suit and forgot to breathe the moment she walked toward him. Thomas officiated, his voice steady as he blessed the union of opposites drawn together by something stronger than reason. The guests were mostly neighbors, classmates, and relatives. The reception was a backyard affair, homemade cakes, lemonade, fiddle music, and dancing on the lawn. Grayson remembered looking at Sophie as they danced under strings of Edison bulbs, the scent of honeysuckle in the air, and thinking, "I never knew the world could feel like this." They honeymooned in Asheville, in a rented cabin where they cooked pancakes on rainy mornings and hiked quiet trails in the afternoons. There were no spreadsheets, no investors, no distractions. Only the steady rhythm of a couple discovering what it meant to wake up beside someone who made the world feel like home. After the honeymoon, reality called. Grayson accepted a competitive software development offer in Seattle. Sophie, reluctant to leave Savannah, suggested they try a bi-coastal setup until she figured out what she wanted. She stayed behind to support her aging parents and keep her dream of opening a textile shop alive. They promised each other they'd make it work, and for a time, they did. Grayson poured himself into building Caldwell Innovations. Sophie opened her shop downtown, selling handmade linens, quilts, and clothing that drew tourists and locals alike. They called every night. She would tell him about a child who picked out a lavender apron for her grandmother. He would tell her about a breakthrough with a new AI model. But their conversations began to drift. Sophie talked about the church needing a new roof. Grayson talked about venture capital. She mentioned a neighbor who lost her dog. Grayson changed the subject to patent applications. Their lives became parallel paths that touched only briefly, like two trains passing in the fog. Still, she believed in them. Every night, she lit a candle on the windowsill and whispered prayers not of fear, but of hope. She would trace his initials in the quilt she was making and remind herself that even distance couldn't stretch true love too far. Grayson, in his office overlooking the Seattle skyline, would stare out and wonder, was success worth this silence? Then one day, Sophie called. Her voice was soft, excited. "Grayson, I'm going to have our baby." When Sophie told Grayson she was pregnant, he was sitting alone in his office, a skyline of steel and ambition glowing outside his window. Her voice came through the phone warm, filled with awe. "Grayson, I'm going to have our baby." For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Grayson stared at the polished edge of his desk. The word baby echoed in the silence around him like a foreign language. He didn't speak it. He didn't understand it. Not really. "You're sure?" he said after a moment, trying to steady his voice. "Yes," she replied softly. "I'm at the clinic now. They confirmed it. I'm okay. I just wanted you to be the first to know." He pressed his hand to his temple, not from anger, not from shame, but fear. It wrapped around him like ice, choking the air out of the room. He congratulated her, made a weak promise to call later, then hung up and stared into nothing for hours. That night, he didn't sleep. Grayson had never imagined himself as a father, not because he thought he'd be bad at it, but because he had built his entire identity around control. Schedules, deadlines, precision. A child didn't come with a roadmap or debugging tool. He tried to tell himself he was just overwhelmed, that he'd come around, that this was joy wrapped in surprise. But as days passed, he grew distant. Sophie noticed. She tried to include him, texts of ultrasound pictures, updates about cravings and kicks. She mailed him a pair of handmade baby socks. "Your future CO pilot," she wrote on the card. He replied with emojis and half-hearted reassurances. When she called him one late night, anxious about a cramp in her side, he answered groggily and said, "Maybe it's just nerves." She felt her heart drop. That was the moment she knew something was shifting. In Savannah, Sophie leaned on her parents more. Her mother cooked nourishing meals and rubbed her back with lavender oil. Her father, once skeptical of Grayson's ways, bit back his "I told you so" and instead showed up with sweet tea and gentle humor. Still, Sophie hoped. She hoped Grayson would surprise her, that he would fly in, wrap her in his arms and say, "I'm ready. Let's do this together." Instead, he showed up unannounced and early. It was a muggy September afternoon. Sophie had just finished folding tiny clothes, her belly now firm and visible beneath a cotton shirt. The house smelled of baby powder and candle wax. On the mantel sat a box of 4 tiny booties, 2 pink, 2 blue, knitted by her mother, who joked that Sophie might be carrying twins. When the front door creaked open, she turned sharply. There stood Grayson, briefcase in hand, looking thinner and paler than she remembered. "Grayson," she said cautiously, "what are you doing here?" "I needed to talk to you," he said, stepping in. He glanced around the home, as if it belonged to a stranger. "I flew in this morning." Sophie gestured to the living room. "You could have called." He looked at the booties on the mantel and visibly flinched. She followed his gaze. "My mom made them," she said, smiling nervously. "Just in case it's a boy or a girl. Or both." Grayson didn't smile back. He placed his briefcase down slowly, then ran a hand through his hair. "Sophie," he began, This isn't easy." She felt it before he said another word. "What do you mean?" she asked, her heart racing. "I don't think I can do this," he said quietly. The room went still. Do what? This parent thing, he said, almost whispering. I thought I could. I thought I'd feel different. But I don't. I'm not built for this, Sophie. She stepped back, disbelief flooding her face. You're not built for this? I've got investors, a company to run. Everything's moving so fast. I'm barely holding it together as it is. She blinked at him. We're having a child, Grayson. I never wanted kids, he said bluntly. You knew that. I knew you were scared, she snapped. But I thought love meant we grow together. I'm not the man you think I am. Sophie's lip trembled. Then who are you, Grayson? Because I've been carrying your child for 5 months and I don't even recognize you. He turned away from her, unable to meet her eyes. It's better if we end this now. Before we bring a child into a broken foundation, you think walking away will fix this? I think it's kinder than pretending. The pain hit Sophie in waves, confusion, then anger, then raw betrayal. You made vows to me. You said forever. He didn't answer. She pressed a hand to her stomach. I gave everything to you. I left my shop for you. I prayed for you. And now you're just done? I'm sorry, he said, and for once, she believed he was. But that didn't make it hurt any less. He picked up his briefcase. You're running, she said. He paused at the door. I hope whatever you're chasing out there, she whispered, is worth the family you just left behind. Then she closed the door behind him, slowly, as if sealing a memory. That night, Sophie lay awake in her old bedroom. Her father sat by her side with an open Bible, not preaching, just being present. She cried until the pillow was soaked. Her mother brought her tea she couldn't drink. And still, the baby inside her kicked, reminding her that life wasn't done with her yet. 3 days later, she returned to the clinic for another ultrasound. She didn't expect what happened next. The technician frowned, clicked through images, and then stepped out to fetch a senior nurse. Sophie's chest tightened. When they returned, the nurse said gently, Ms. Miller, it appears there's been a mistake. You're not having one baby. Sophie's heart pounded. Twins? The nurse smiled, eyes wide. You're carrying 4. Time stood still. 4? She repeated. As in, 4? Yes, ma'am. Quadruplets. Her hands flew to her belly, trembling. The nurse placed a printout in her hand, showing 4 distinct heartbeats. It's rare, but they're strong. Sophie stared at the grainy image, the storm of emotion inside her too big to contain, fear, joy, disbelief. Tears fell freely. She whispered into the room. I'm not alone. Outside, the magnolia trees bent in the wind, as if bowing to her strength. The weeks that followed Sophie's quadruplet revelation were a blur of logistics, shock, and whispered prayers. She'd walk through the house at night, one hand on her belly, murmuring lullabies she barely remembered from her own childhood. 4 babies. Her mother, Mary, sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of coupons. Her father, Thomas, paced with his hands folded behind his back, murmuring scripture for strength. The Miller home became a quiet operations center, powered by love and trembling anticipation. The community rallied in quiet, fierce waves. The local women's group from her father's church brought casseroles and fresh produce. A retired seamstress from 2 blocks over donated hand-stitched onesies and bibs. Neighbors she hadn't spoken to in years offered car seats and strollers from their grown children. A midwife volunteered weekly home visits. Still, Sophie felt the loneliness like a slow-burning flame inside her. Grayson hadn't reached out again. Not a call, not a message. Nothing. The day labor began. It was storming, an early winter thunderstorm that rattled the old windows. Sophie's water broke in the hallway while folding a baby blanket. Her mother rushed to her side. Her father grabbed the overnight bag that had sat ready for weeks. At the hospital, the nurses moved with calm urgency. Quad delivery, one whispered to another, eyes wide. Hours later, the operating room echoed with tiny, defiant cries. Isabel was the first to arrive, a soft-haired girl with wide eyes and a heart monitor that beeped steadily. Next came Jackson, fists curled tightly and lungs already full of fight. Amelia followed, dainty but with a strong grip. And finally, Noah, the smallest, his cry high-pitched but insistent. Sophie wept when she held them. Not out of fear, not from pain, but from awe. They're perfect, she whispered, voice cracking. All of them. For the next 6 weeks, her world became the NICU, pumping schedules, oxygen checks, beeping monitors, whispered prayers over incubators. Each day was a marathon. Her mother rotated in to help. Her father slept in the waiting room on fold-out chairs. Sophie read to the babies, hummed lullabies, and kissed their foreheads through incubator walls. Grayson never came. On the night the babies were cleared to come home, the nurses hugged her goodbye with tears in their eyes. "You're a warrior," one whispered. Sophie smiled. "No, I'm just a mother." The house changed forever. Each room became a station, one for changing, one for rocking, one for feeding, and the kitchen turned into a mini lab of formula, breast milk, and carefully labeled bottles. Sophie rarely slept more than 90 minutes at a time. There were moments she cried quietly on the bathroom floor, then got up and kept going. Her parents remained her anchor. Thomas insisted on story time every evening, 2 kids on his lap, 2 tucked beside him. Mary took the dawn shift, letting Sophie rest an extra hour. Friends donated diapers in bulk, local businesses pitched in with care packages, and a GoFundMe started by the church kept them afloat. Sophie gave up her textile shop, but she didn't give up on herself. When the babies turned 9 months, she enrolled in nursing school part-time. Online classes at night, flashcards in the laundry room, quizzes taken on her phone while pumping. Her dream was to become a pediatric nurse. "If I can care for 4, she said, smiling to a professor over Zoom, "I can care for 100. The years moved, not quickly but fully. Each child grew into their own rhythm. Isabel, the quiet eldest, loved poetry and shadowed Sophie everywhere. She hummed lullabies to herself and always picked the softest blanket for nap time. Jackson, bold and curious, dismantled toys just to rebuild them. He once tried to fix the vacuum cleaner with leftover puzzle pieces. It worked for 20 minutes. Amelia, artistic and thoughtful, colored on walls, furniture, and even herself. When scolded, she explained, "It's a mural, for the family." Noah, the youngest, had a laugh that turned heads and a fearlessness that made Sophie's heart skip beats. He liked to run, fast and wild, chasing butterflies or nothing at all. Together, they filled the house with chaos and magic. One afternoon, Sophie sat in the backyard watching them chase bubbles. Her hands rested on her knees, a rare moment of stillness. The sky was pink with dusk, and the breeze carried the scent of honeysuckle again. Her father joined her, easing onto the old swing. "You've done well, baby girl," he said. "I'm tired," she admitted. "You're still shining." Sophie looked at her children. "Do you think he ever wonders about them?" Thomas exhaled slowly. "If he has a soul, he does." She nodded, no longer bitter, just accepting. "They ask about him sometimes. What do you say?" "I tell them their father had dreams that didn't match ours, but that we've got more than enough love to go around." Thomas placed a hand on hers, "And one day, when they're grown, they'll know what strength looks like, because they were raised by it." Sophie smiled faintly. "They'll know what love looks like, too." The next day she found a stack of bills she couldn't cover, textbooks she still needed, and Noah had drawn astronauts on the living room wall with permanent marker. She scolded, cried, and laughed, sometimes all within the same breath. Life was not easy, but it was full. One Sunday morning, the children surprised her. Isabel had written a poem and recited it in front of the congregation. Jackson fixed the church mic so it wouldn't squeak. Amelia passed out programs she'd drawn by hand. Noah stood beside her, holding her hand and swaying with the music. As the choir sang, Sophie closed her eyes and whispered to the sky, "Thank you," for all of it, because despite being left behind, she had gained everything that mattered. The air smelled of roasted pecans and damp leaves, and the riverfront sparkled with golden sunlight. Tourists meandered down the cobblestone paths, sipping lattes and snapping photos of storefronts dressed in pumpkins and mums. Grayson Caldwell stood at the corner of Broughton Street, adjusting the cuff of his tailored jacket, unsure why he felt the pinch of anxiety in his chest. He had returned to Savannah for the first time in years, using a tech conference in Atlanta as an excuse. The truth was simpler. Restless nights, recurring dreams, and a gnawing sense of unfinished business had brought him back. Savannah had changed. Trendy cafes had replaced antique stores. Painted murals now adorned brick alleyways he once rushed through on dates. But some things remained untouched, like the bent iron fence near Sophie's old textile shop, now boarded up, its windows dusty. He stood outside the rusted lantern cafe, blinking against the sun. He was supposed to meet his old college friend Mark, but he was early. The bell above the cafe door chimed as he stepped inside. The warmth hit him first. Coffee, vanilla, and cinnamon. The place buzzed with quiet chatter. Then he saw her. At a corner table sat a woman with golden brown hair tied in a loose braid. She leaned forward, feeding small bites of pancake to a chubby-cheeked toddler in a blue hoodie. Two other children, a boy and girl, sat nearby, sharing a plate of scrambled eggs and whispering jokes. A fourth child leaned beneath the table, only her yellow bow visible above the bench. Grayson froze. The woman laughed, a soft, melodic laugh he knew better than any music. It struck him like a chord long buried. Sophie. Older now. Her face had matured, eyes slightly wearier, but still bright with warmth. She wore a light denim jacket over a soft dress, and she moved with a calm authority that didn't need to announce itself. His heart kicked hard. He blinked, certain it was some look-alike. But then the red-haired girl looked up, and Grayson saw it. His eyes, his dimples, his chin. His knees nearly gave out. One child turned toward Sophie, asking for more syrup. Another tried to balance a fork on his nose. They were chaotic, beautiful, alive, and they were his. Grayson stepped forward on instinct. He paused only when Sophie caught his reflection in a spoon and turned. Their eyes met. Time fractured. The sounds of the cafe faded, muffled by the thud of memory and emotion crashing over both of them. Sophie's face shifted, shock, then guarded tension. She stood slowly, positioning herself between the children and him. "Grayson," she said, voice steady but cool. "Sophie." He breathed. "Hi." The little girl with the red hair looked up at him. "Mommy, who's that?" Sophie placed a hand gently on the girl's shoulder. "Just someone I used to know." Grayson cleared his throat. "Can we talk, please?" Sophie hesitated, eyes searching his face for sincerity, or perhaps weakness. She nodded to an empty chair. "Talk, then." He sat, cautiously, his knees inches from a plate of syrup and crayons. "I didn't know about them." Sophie's gaze sharpened. "You didn't want to know." He shook his head, swallowing the rising lump in his throat. "No, I swear, I never knew there was more than one. I didn't even know you kept the pregnancy." Her jaw tightened, but her voice remained even. "You didn't ask." The children stared. Noah, the boy in blue, tilted his head and said to Amelia, "Is he a stranger or a friend?" Amelia answered confidently, "He's probably both." Sophie knelt beside Noah. "Eat your pancake, baby." Grayson couldn't stop looking at them. The resemblance was undeniable. In every face, he saw a piece of himself. "They're beautiful," he whispered. "They're strong," Sophie replied. There was a pause, thick with unspoken history. "I was a coward," he admitted. "I was terrified. I thought I couldn't be what you needed. I thought walking away was better than failing you." Sophie's hands trembled slightly, but she kept feeding the children. "And in doing so, you failed anyway." Grayson looked at Isabel, who sat with perfect posture, carefully slicing her toast. "What are their names?" Sophie didn't look up. "Isabel, Jackson, Amelia, and Noah." He repeated them softly, as if trying to etch them into his bones. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said finally. "But I didn't think I had a right to come back." "You didn't," she replied quietly. "But you're here now." Noah climbed onto her lap, resting his head against her chest. Amelia offered Grayson a crayon and asked, "Want to draw?" Sophie's gaze didn't soften, but she allowed a hint of a breath. "They don't know who you are," she said. "They've grown up loved, protected." Grayson nodded. "And I won't take that away. I want to understand, and if you'll let me, I want to be part of their lives." Sophie looked at her children, her world, her every heartbeat. Then she looked at the man who'd missed it all. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I saw you," he said, "and I saw what I could have been a part of. And for the first time, I realized what I lost." She said nothing. A long silence passed before she added, "We can talk, but not here. Come to the riverfront later, after school pickup." He nodded, voice nearly gone. "Thank you." Sophie turned back to the children, guiding them through napkin cleanups and backpack gathering. As she stood to leave, Isabel reached for her hand, and Noah reached for the other. Before they walked out, Sophie glanced back once. Grayson was still seated, staring at the spot where she'd been. The river glistened beneath the setting sun, as if it were holding its own secrets. Grayson stood at the edge of the waterfront, hands tucked into the pockets of his gray jacket. A soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying with it memories of laughter he'd once known. Long walks under mossy branches, the scent of jasmine, Sophie's voice in the quiet. This place hadn't changed, but he had. Behind him, footsteps. He turned. Sophie walked toward him, her dress swaying just below her knees, a jacket pulled snug across her shoulders. The children were not with her. Her expression was unreadable, composed, cautious, but not closed. "You came," she said simply. "I said I would." For a few moments, neither spoke. The river whispered nearby, filling the silence with a strange kind of comfort. Sophie stepped beside him, not close, not far. "You said you didn't know," she began, watching the water. "About the babies, about what came after?" Grayson nodded. "I swear I didn't. I thought you'd moved on, that you wanted me out of your life for good." She tilted her head slightly. "I did. For a long time." He looked at her. "And now?" She sighed. "I'm not sure, but I do know the kids deserve the truth, and maybe I do too." Grayson nodded again. "Thank you for giving me a chance." "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "I'm still not sure what this is." They walked, past the old bookshop, past the quiet bench where he once kissed her cheek the week before proposing. Memories floated up like lanterns, warm and distant. "I was angry for years," Sophie said suddenly. "But mostly I was disappointed, not just in you, in myself, for believing you'd choose us." He lowered his eyes. "You were right to be angry. I don't want an apology," she added. "I want honesty. I want to know what changed. Why now?" Grayson paused, then answered truthfully. "I got everything I thought I wanted. Awards, articles, my name on buildings. But every night, I came home to silence. No laughter, no tiny feet running around, no reason to slow down." He looked at her. "And then I saw you, with them. And I realized I've been starving, Sophie, for years, and I didn't even know it." They stood quietly again. Sophie touched the railing with both hands. "They're good kids. Isabel reads books way above her age. Jackson can dismantle anything mechanical and fix it better. Amelia's already selling her artwork at school. And Noah, he'll be a doctor." He patched a neighbor's scraped knee and asked for payment in gummy bears. Grayson chuckled softly. "I'd give him a whole box." "You missed everything," Sophie said, turning to him. "First steps, first words, fevers, nightmares, school projects, hugs, the hard days and the beautiful ones." "I know," he whispered, "and I'll never get them back." Sophie watched him, waiting for the usual defensiveness, the excuses. None came. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added, "but I'm here now. And I'm staying, not just for them, for you too. If you'll let me." Her eyes shimmered in the fading light, but she didn't blink. "Do you know what trust is, Grayson?" she asked. He nodded faintly. "It's what I lost." "No," she said. "It's what you gave up." They kept walking. At the playground just beyond the bend, 4 voices rang out. "Mommy." The children ran toward her in a blur of color and energy. Jackson got there first, breathless. Noah fell, but then Amelia made him laugh, and Isabel found a feather. Isabel held up the feather like a sacred object. "It's from a hawk, I think." Sophie crouched down. "That's wonderful, baby. Where's the feather now?" "In my hair," Isabel whispered. "Like yours." Sophie smiled and kissed her head. Grayson watched, hands frozen at his sides. Noah stumbled toward him, scraped knee and all, holding a juice box. "Hi again, mister," he chirped. Sophie rose. "This is Grayson," she said gently to the kids. He was a very important part of my life a long time ago." Jackson tilted his head. "Like a prince who went away." Grayson crouched, his throat tight. "More like someone who got lost and took too long to find his way back." The children exchanged glances. Isabel stepped forward, serious. "Did you know about us?" "No," Grayson replied honestly. "But I wish I had." Noah handed him the juice box. "You can hold this if you want." Grayson took it, careful not to squeeze it. "Thank you." Amelia tugged on his sleeve. "Do you like pancakes?" "I do," he said. She nodded thoughtfully. "You can sit with us next time, if Mommy says yes." All eyes turned to Sophie. She gave a single nod, slow and cautious. "That'd be nice," she said. Later that evening, back at the house, Grayson sat on the porch steps while the kids played inside. Sophie brought out 2 mugs of tea, just like old times. The porch light cast a warm glow on her face. "Your mother's coming by in the morning," she said. And she'll probably give you a hard time. I deserve it. Sophie sipped her tea. So, what do you want from them? Nothing, he said. Just the chance to be part of their lives, to know what makes them laugh, to show up for them, to listen. She looked at him, long and hard. And from me? He swallowed. A chance to prove I'm not the same man who left. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she looked toward the living room window, where the shadows of her children danced on the curtains. You'll have to earn it, she said softly. I intend to, he replied. Inside, Noah's voice echoed, followed by giggles. Grayson smiled at the sound, and Sophie, just for a moment, let her smile follow. The thunder rolled in slow and low over Savannah one humid July night. The air felt heavy, almost swollen, and the sky bore a strange yellow hue as evening darkened into a storm. Inside the Miller household, the children were finishing their grilled cheese sandwiches while Sophie dried dishes at the sink. Her father, Thomas, stepped out to the back porch with his toolbox in hand. He had insisted on reinforcing a shaky railing before the rain came. Won't take me 10 minutes, he'd said. Sophie glanced at the time. Dad, the sky's about to open up. I'll be quick, he called back. The rain began softly, then turned hard and sudden. She was halfway through folding kitchen towels when something felt wrong. She heard nothing, not even footsteps on the porch. Dad? She called. No answer. Daddy? She ran outside. Thomas lay on the porch, tools scattered around him. One arm was draped across his chest, the other limp at his side. The rain had soaked his shirt and matted his silver hair to his forehead. Daddy. Sophie dropped to her knees, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse. It was faint, but there. She screamed for the children to stay inside and grabbed her phone. 911, please. My father, he collapsed. Within minutes, the ambulance arrived. Red lights bathed the walls of the house in an eerie pulse as the EMTs loaded Thomas onto a stretcher. Sophie held his hand as long as they allowed, whispering through tears, Hold on. Please hold on. As they pulled away, her mother's car skidded to a stop in front of the house. Mary ran to Sophie, her hands already reaching. Go with him, she said. I'll stay with the kids. Sophie nodded and jumped into her car. At the hospital, the hallways were too bright and too quiet. Sophie sat hunched in a vinyl chair, hands clenched in her lap, staring at the door to the emergency room. Then a voice cut through her daze. I came as fast as I could. She looked up. Grayson. He was windblown, drenched, still wearing the same clothes he'd left the office in. His tie was loose, his eyes dark with worry. Mary called, he added, stepping closer. Sophie didn't respond, but she didn't tell him to leave. Instead, she let him sit beside her in silence. I'm here, he whispered. You're not alone. Time crawled. Nurses came and went. Sophie pressed her fists against her mouth and fought back sobs. The sound of heart monitors and intercom announcements filled the air. Finally, a doctor appeared. He's stable, she said, offering a small smile. It was a mild cardiac episode. We're keeping him overnight, but he'll recover just fine. Sophie sagged in her chair, her entire body giving way to the weight of relief. She closed her eyes, whispering a shaky, Thank you. Grayson touched her shoulder. You did everything right. She turned to him, her expression raw. I thought I was going to lose him. I know. The nurse returned and guided Sophie to Thomas's room. Grayson followed silently, not asking questions, not pressing. He stood in the corner as Sophie sat by her father's bedside, gently brushing damp hair from his forehead. Thomas opened his eyes slowly. You crying again, girl? Sophie let out a tearful laugh. Not anymore. You called him? Thomas asked, nodding toward Grayson. Sophie shook her head. Mom did. Thomas looked at Grayson for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Good. That night, after Thomas was settled and sleeping, Sophie and Grayson sat in the hospital's family room. The storm had quieted. The windows were fogged from the humidity, and the fluorescent lights above gave everything a dull glow. Sophie hugged herself tightly. I thought I was done with this kind of fear, she murmured. You're never really done, Grayson replied. Not with the people you love. She looked at him. I loved you once. More than anything. He met her eyes. I never stopped. She shook her head. Don't say that. Not now. I need to say it, he said gently. I've done 1,000 things wrong, Sophie, but coming back was the first thing that felt right in years. And sitting here with you, I know now. I'm not leaving again." She stared at him for a long time. Her expression softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a recognition of truth. "You held my hand when I was about to fall apart," she whispered. "Even when you had every reason not to." He leaned forward. "That's what family does." She hesitated, then reached out and placed her hand on his. "I want to believe you," she said. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you can—" A silence followed, deep and calm. Sophie wiped her eyes and leaned her head against his shoulder. One storm at a time. Back at the house the next morning, the rain was gone. Dew clung to the grass, and the sky had cleared into a soft blue. The children tiptoed around their grandfather's empty chair, drawing cards and coloring hearts. When Thomas returned home later that afternoon, they showered him with hugs and glitter. Grayson stayed through it all, quiet, helpful, present. He carried groceries. He took the trash out. He read to Noah at nap time and fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen. That night, as the house settled into sleep, Sophie stepped out onto the porch. Grayson followed, coffee mugs in hand. She looked up at the stars. "You're not who you used to be." He stood beside her, humble. "Neither are you." They didn't kiss. Not yet. But when he said goodnight, Sophie's voice was softer. "See you tomorrow?" He smiled. "Every day you'll have me." Grayson arrived early that morning. The sun was just beginning to stretch its golden arms across the rooftops, and birds chattered in the trees as he knocked on the miller's front door, holding a box of muffins and a quiet determination. Sophie opened the door in an oversized shirt and messy bun, blinking sleep from her eyes. "You're early." "I wanted to beat the chaos," he said, holding up the box. "Peace offering?" She glanced at the baked goods, then at him. "They better have chocolate chips." "They do." A beat passed. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the day was already stirring to life. Jackson was racing a remote control truck down the hallway. Isabel was humming as she packed her backpack. Amelia sat at the table sketching a comic strip, and Noah was trying to stick cereal to the dog. Grayson stood in the center of it all, overwhelmed and oddly at ease. "Morning, everybody," he said. 4 heads turned. Amelia squinted. "You're back?" "I am." Jackson folded his arms. "You said that yesterday." Grayson smiled. "And I'll say it again tomorrow." Noah handed him a spoon. "Help me with the cereal catapult." Sophie watched from the kitchen, arms crossed, expression unreadable, but there was a softness in the corners of her mouth. Later that afternoon, after school drop-offs, Grayson followed Sophie into the living room. Toys were scattered across the floor. Folded laundry waited on the couch. A sense of real life buzzed through the air like music. "I want to help," he said. "Not just visit, be part of their routine." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "You want chores?" "I want responsibility." She handed him a list. "Start with that." He took it and smiled. "You're not going easy on me." "I shouldn't." And she didn't. Grayson picked up Jackson from his after-school robotics club and stayed to watch him test a spaghetti tower with marshmallow stabilizers. He helped Amelia design labels for her lemonade stand and printed them out on custom stickers using software from his office. He let Isabel read her poetry aloud at dinner, listening without glancing at his phone once. He ran after Noah when he sprinted toward a duck pond, laughing as they both returned muddy and breathless. With each day, the wall between him and the children thinned. They began calling him Grayson without flinching. Then came the first time Noah called him Dad. They were baking cookies together. Noah spilled flour on the floor and looked up sheepishly. "Sorry, Dad." The word hung in the air, suspended like magic. Grayson blinked. "What did you say?" Noah shrugged. "You're my dad, right?" His chest swelled with something almost unbearable. He bent down, swept the boy into his arms and whispered, "Yes, I am." The milestones followed like dominoes. Grayson taught Jackson how to code a simple app. He built a treehouse with Thomas, slowly, carefully, under the watchful eyes of 4 little foremen. He sat through PTA meetings and volunteered at the school fair. He got booed in the dunk tank and loved every second. He took each child on solo outings, a poetry cafe with Isabel, a hardware store trip with Jackson, an art museum with Amelia, and a visit to the fire station with Noah, who asked 52 questions and took home a plastic badge. Each time, Sophie watched from the sidelines, cautious, but hopeful. One night, after all the children were asleep, Grayson helped her clean the kitchen. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" For being here." He paused. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded. Then, after a long breath, she said, "I started to forget what it felt like to have someone stand beside me." Grayson stepped closer. "Then let me help you remember." She didn't move away. A few days later, Sophie's nursing school hosted a recognition dinner. Grayson offered to take the kids for the night. She hesitated. "Alone?" He nodded. "I'll text updates every hour." She exhaled. "Okay." That evening, he made homemade pizza, let them wear pajamas all day, and built a fort in the living room out of sheets and chairs. He read stories with sound effects, helped with a lost tooth crisis, and fell asleep with Jackson curled at his side. At 2 a.m., he woke to find Isabel draping a blanket over him and whispering, "Night, Daddy." He didn't sleep after that. He just lay there, overwhelmed by the weight and warmth of being needed. The next morning, Sophie returned. The house was a mild disaster. Flour on the floor, sock puppets on the chandelier, one child asleep on the staircase. She surveyed the scene. "Did you survive?" Grayson appeared from the kitchen with a spatula in hand. "Barely. But I made pancakes." She stepped closer. "You know they're going to remember this, right?" He smiled. "I hope so." She tilted her head. "You're really doing this?" "I told you. Every day." She studied him. His eyes were tired but bright. His hands bore traces of syrup. His heart, she could see, was finally wide open. That evening, as the sky turned dusky purple, Sophie invited him to stay for dinner. The children cheered. They sat around the table, laughter weaving through the room like a thread. Sophie caught his eye and smiled. And for the first time in years, it felt like something whole was forming, not quickly, but carefully. Piece by piece, not perfect, but real. Fall came gently to Savannah that year. The air turned crisp, the leaves fell in amber spirals, and the evenings carried the scent of wood smoke and cinnamon. On one particular Saturday, Grayson found himself standing in the backyard of Sophie's home, staring up at the treehouse he'd built with Thomas. He heard footsteps behind him. "You measured the ladder 4 times, Sophie said with a soft smile. "Only 4? She laughed, brushing a stray leaf from her sweater. The sun filtered through the branches, painting her face in gold. Grayson stepped closer. "Do you remember the last thing I said to you when I left?" She nodded. "You said, 'I can't be the man you need.'" "I was wrong," he said, voice steady. "I wasn't the man you needed back then. But I've worked hard to become him now." She looked at him, heart flickering with old pain and new hope. "You've changed," she whispered. "But the kids, they don't just need memories, they need consistency. And so do I." Grayson reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "No pressure," he said quickly, opening it. Inside was a delicate gold ring, adorned with 4 tiny stones, one for each child. "This isn't about erasing the past," he continued. "It's about honoring it, about moving forward, together, not perfect, not rushed, just real." Sophie blinked rapidly. "You're not asking for marriage." "Not yet," he said. "I'm asking for a beginning." She stared at the ring for a long time. Then, with a trembling smile, she closed the box gently and held it in her palm. "I'll keep this," she said. "And we'll see." Grayson nodded. "That's more than enough." A week later, Grayson helped the kids carve pumpkins on the porch. Isabel designed hers with intricate poetry verses. Jackson wired a blinking lead into his. Amelia painted hers with swirls of silver. Noah filled his with glitter. Sophie watched from the doorway, arms folded, heart fuller than it had been in a decade. By Thanksgiving, Grayson had become a permanent fixture. He helped the kids cook. Jackson mashed potatoes until they stuck to the ceiling. Isabel stirred cranberry sauce. Amelia decorated the table, and Noah added jelly beans to the rolls, for surprise, he explained. That evening, under twinkling porch lights, they all sat together, Thomas saying grace, Mary laughing softly, Sophie wiping flour off Noah's cheek. It was messy, loud, wonderful. Grayson held Sophie's hand under the table. Later that night, while the children dozed in sleeping bags under the treehouse, Grayson and Sophie sat on the porch swing. "You did this," she whispered. "You came back and built something better." "We built it," he said. "You kept everything from falling apart. I just caught up." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I think I'm ready." He looked at her, eyes wide. "Ready?" Sophie smiled. "To try again. Not for the past. For the future, he took her hand, slow and steady. Exactly. Months passed. Winter melted into spring. Grayson moved into a home just 4 blocks away, close enough to be part of daily life, far enough to let them breathe. He continued to co-parent with intention, attending recitals, dentist appointments, birthday parties. He let Isabel beat him at Scrabble. He helped Jackson take apart the microwave, with permission. He framed Amelia's drawings for the hallway. He bought Noah his first stethoscope. But it wasn't just the big gestures. It was the quiet things. Lunches packed, notes left on the fridge, hugs before bedtime, and always showing up. One early summer morning, Sophie stood at the kitchen counter flipping pancakes as sunlight poured in through the windows. Grayson entered, carrying a sleepy Noah who had wandered into his house overnight and refused to leave. Sophie turned. "Good morning." "Morning," he replied, setting Noah down gently. "He said he had a dream we were all superheroes." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "And what was your power?" Grayson grinned. "Apparently, I bake muffins that stop meteors." She laughed, warm and easy, useful. Isabel entered next, followed by the others, filling the room with clatter and chatter. Breakfast was loud, syrupy, and chaotic. Grayson sat in the middle, helping pour juice and butter toast. Sophie leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching her life pulse around her. When the meal quieted, Grayson stood and cleared his throat. "There's something I've been thinking about." The room hushed. He looked at the children first. "I know I missed a lot of your lives. That's my biggest regret, but I'm here now, and I want to be part of every chapter moving forward. If you'll let me—" The children nodded. Jackson said, "Only if you keep building robots with me." "Deal." Then Grayson turned to Sophie. He reached into his pocket again, pulling out the same ring. But now, the gold band had been joined by a second simple wedding band. He dropped to one knee. The room gasped. "Sophie Miller, you've been my greatest heartbreak and my greatest hope. I love you, not for who you were, but for who you've become and for who we are together. Will you marry me again?" Sophie's eyes filled. The children watched, wide-eyed and motionless. She reached out and took his hand. "Yes," she whispered. Noah jumped into the air. "Does this mean I get cake?" Everyone laughed. Grayson rose, pulling Sophie into a soft kiss, surrounded by giggles and applause. This time, no doubts, no running, just love, chosen and steady. The wedding was simple, held in the backyard beneath the magnolia tree, the same place they once danced in their youth. Sophie wore a tea-length dress with lace sleeves. Grayson wore a navy suit and tearful eyes. Thomas walked Sophie down the makeshift aisle. Mary wiped her cheeks with a napkin. The children each carried something. Isabel held Sophie's bouquet. Jackson guarded the rings. Amelia passed out hand-drawn programs. Noah served juice boxes with a bow tie and a mission. They exchanged vows under a sky streaked with light. This time, there were no grand declarations, just promises spoken from deep within. Afterward, they danced again, barefoot on the grass, laughter swirling around them like the wind. And when the night grew quiet, when the children had fallen asleep on blankets beneath the treehouse, Sophie and Grayson stood on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms. "Home," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "Always. Have you ever witnessed a love that returns stronger after being tested by time, loss, and growth? If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. Share it with someone who believes in second chances, and don't forget to subscribe to Love and Twilights for more unforgettable journeys of healing, hope, and true connection.